Audience picture first. See that I'm actually videoing to my coworker audience. Good afternoon. This presentation is on a research project I did on PBIS in juvenile justice settings. So what I'm meaning by that is there is schools that are within juvenile halls or juvenile correction centers. In every one of them there is some sort of school where the kids go to school. And so my study was on how PBIS translates to a juvenile justice setting. So, because those of you in my audience know about PBIS and have a good understanding because we implement it in the school, I'm not going to go over crazy details about it, but I'm going to do a historical overview. So in general, PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, and has been an evidence-based multi-tier system being used for over 20 years. PBIS is a preventative-oriented framework that assists schools in adopting and organizing evidence-based behavioral interventions, and they're organized in a three-tier system of support: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. PBIS became popular after the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEAS is what its acronym is, in 1997, which encouraged the use of positive behavioral interventions. There's been a trend in schools since the 1990s, though, to be using like a zero tolerance policy, which focused on punishment for problem behaviors, responding with harsher disciplines and consequences, and that also continues in many schools today. Many studies have shown that these policies have a negative effect on student engagement and success. So in 2008, the American Psychological Association did a study on these zero policy schools, and they examined them and found that they found higher expulsion and suspension rates and no evidence that the school was any safer. So in contrast, so why PBIS? In contrast, PBIS is a progressive approach to achieving both social and academic success, and it's been proven. So current trends in education reform in the U.S. have focused on systematic changes that align academic, behavioral, and social emotional learning for the students. More recently in California in 2015, AB 104 was enacted that encouraged schools to establish these school-wide data-driven systems of support. The California Department of Education soon afterwards began moving towards multi-tiered systems of supports, which are MTSS is what they were calling them, focusing on aligning the Common Core standards with these initiatives. So PBIS was and is the model for establishing those MTSS systems and has a proven track record with well over 25,000 schools and schools getting added every month. So probably many more than that now. The benefits of PBIS result in less office discipline referrals, which are referred to ODRs. You'll hear me refer to them like that in the future. More time engaging in academics and academic improvements, and positive school culture altogether. So PBIS has proven to work in traditional school settings, but I wanted to know what is the evidence that it is effective in juvenile justice settings. And before I get to my questions, so my love affair with PBIS began about 3 years ago when I was working in an alternative education setting. And I found a lot of the systems of support worked very, very well in that school. Within our district housed the Juvenile Justice School, which was called Table Mountain School, is called Table Mountain School. This housed all of the juveniles that were incarcerated for any reason, for any length of time, the revolving door of students, and the high-risk nature of students caused it to be, caused me to question whether or not PBIS would work in that kind of system. So that's kind of where I got my idea to study this. And in doing research, I definitely found limited information about the effectiveness of PBIS in juvenile justice settings. Although the research is minimal, what I did find does point towards benefits and positive outcomes. So all of this led me to my 3 research questions, which are there positive behavioral changes within the youth that are in the juvenile justice setting under PBIS? Are modifications to PBIS needed? Modifications as in how PBIS functions in a normal public school setting? Did certain things have to change to modify to a juvenile justice setting? And then the third question is there positive transition back into the community? So has someone tracked whether or not after students have been involved in a PBIS juvenile justice system, are they finding that their transition into community is better? And if so, is there less kind of, transition back into the juvenile justice setting? So, as I mentioned, so how did I get this data? So as I mentioned, I developed a relationship with the juvenile justice school, with Table Mountain School, while I worked for the district. The Table Mountain School houses about 40 kids on the average. And I became more aware of the school during district trainings, meetings, and then sometimes we would have students that, students in common. So Table Mountain School began implementing PBIS in 2015. And although I left the district in 2017, my contacts there were gracious enough to assist me with research materials, which was amazing. So I was given school-wide data on the office discipline referrals over a 3-year time period, 3 school year time period, staff surveys, PBIS team data, and I was able to do 3 pretty intensive interviews with staff members, with the principal, with the district PBIS advisor, and with the county transitional specialist. So that is how I gathered my data. So what did I find? So what I found, okay. So my literature review found a growing consensus that juvenile justice school systems nationwide have found success with PBIS implementation. So my assumption was that my data from Table Mountain would be similar, which for the most part it was. I found an overwhelming positive impact of PBIS on the culture at Table Mountain. There was a decrease in ODRs for common problem behaviors. There was a decrease in the amount of multiple ODRs that each student was receiving. School attendance seemed to increase. Staff satisfaction was high after 2 years. Still high after 2 years. PBIS seemed to be implemented with fidelity very well over the 3-year period that I was looking at. And so the following slides I'm going to show you are just a couple examples of the positive impact. I had a lot of examples in my research paper, but I picked 2 that stood out the most to me. So this slide or table outlines ODRs, so office discipline referrals, for 2 school years. So this is all of 2016-17 and 2017-18. And so 16-17 is in green, 17-18 is in blue. I did say that they implemented PBIS in 2015, but that data was, they didn't track it with fidelity, so I felt using it wasn't going to be accurate. So I just chose those final 2 school years. So a few problem behaviors are popular, if you can notice. So disrespect, if you can see it from there, but this is disrespect, this is defiance, and this is disruption. The M next to them means major. So they tracked major and then they tracked minor. So in the juvenile hall, they were probably most concerned with major. So as you can see, disrespect, for example, disrespect decreased from 92 referrals to 34 the second year. Disruption decreased from 122 to 83 the next year. And defiance was the most significant. Here you can see it just on the graph. That went from 248 to 68, which is a 73% decrease. And overall, all referrals, there was 538 referrals in 16-17 school year, and that decreased to 230 in 17-18, which is a 57% decrease. In interviewing the staff, they also reported that this ODR data was a good representation of how PBIS has changed the behavior and the culture. The second table is, oh, it got cut off. Okay, it says up there, staff perception, school-wide staff perception survey. It got cut off on this slide. Sorry about that. So what the staff was surveyed on, they were surveyed at the beginning of the school year in 2016 and at the end of the school year in 2017. I did not get any data from the 2017-18 because it hadn't yet been completed the second time when I was doing this research. So I'm just using this as an example. So the questions they were asked is whether or not they felt the expectations for PBIS were defined, expectations were taught. They were asked about the reward system, the violation system, decision-making process within PBIS management, and district-wide support. In all categories, you can see that staff perception got better or, increased. I like that district support was at 100% at the beginning and at the end. I think this is huge to PBIS being implemented with fidelity and having support. District support is huge. So the perception of the violation system also held steady, but it was really high too at 75%. Expectations defined and taught went up dramatically to 100% and 80%, which is huge because expectations defined and taught is the foundation of PBIS. Overall implementation average was at 83% by the end of the school year. And in interviewing, according to the district PBIS trainer, schools hope to be at 80% fidelity overall when PBIS is implemented over a few years. So Table Mountain was functioning by the second year technically at 83%. So they were functioning with really good fidelity. So obviously there's going to be drawbacks, there's going to be modifications, right? So one of my questions obviously was what had to be modified or changed to adapt PBIS to a juvenile justice setting. And in other research, it pointed that in other research that I had, literature research, they pointed to a lot of tweaks that were needed to take place in facilities. So, and obviously because a juvenile justice school presents unique demographical and educational differences to a traditional public school. So what had to be modified and what was not working? The system at Table Mountain School has gone through different variations of PBIS reward systems and supports. From 2015 to 17, the school utilized a punch card system to reward positive behavior. So I think the students would wear it around their neck like on a lanyard, because I think they also had like a card that probably more of an ID badge too. And so the punch card was on their ID badge, and they actually just got things punched and when they hit a certain amount. some rewards happened. So after staff evaluated the system a little more, they felt that the students needed more personal and individualized process because of the higher level of need. And because they had less students at the school, they could provide this kind of individualized service. So by mid-2017, the staff began a modified check-in, check-out process with every student. The punch cards were still used, but the students would now earn points with every class period for above and beyond expectations, along with the check-in, check-out process. So some of the, what isn't working quite well yet at Table Mountain is they have had issues implementing Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. The only Tier 2 supports that they have been able to incorporate were some behavioral contracts and the check-in, check-out process that they have in place for every student. So according to the principal, this has to do with the nature of the students they serve, the lack of staff and resources for implementing these services, and the fact that a lot of these students receive higher level services already at the juvenile hall, and just the coordination has been an issue. Additionally, my final question addressed positive community transitions. And unfortunately, I found no data or information on community transitions, or that is my data, that there is none. The county has not tracked their inmates past the juvenile hall. The reason I was given has to do with staffing. No one that has time to collect the data. All the staff members I interviewed, though, felt that the data would be useful, and they wanted to find a way to start collecting it. So this would be a great future research project for someone, which is a great transition to my next slide, which has to do with implications and where do we go from here. So obviously, through my research and stuff, we've proven, PBIS has proven to be an effective school-wide program and provides positive implications in a juvenile justice school, such as Table Mountain, with modifications. So there's still a lack of sufficient data regarding PBIS implementation in a juvenile justice setting. But this current research does help shed some light on benefits and positive results within the systems. The research and data could be useful to other juvenile justice schools to support multi-tiered systems and implementation. The research notes modifications to traditional PBIS supports that also could be helpful to other juvenile justice schools. So although Butte County has not yet collected data on community transitions, the future implications on that would be really helpful. So additionally, further studies and data on long-term effects of PBIS at Table Mountain School would be helpful. Since implementation of PBIS is relatively new, they are only in year 3 of their implementation. So, and Tier 2 and 3 implementation would definitely be a future interest to look at. So some additional research questions that could be of interest would be, what are the effects of PBIS on academic improvement and academic engagement within the students? What do Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports look like in a juvenile justice setting? Is it difficult to sustain a PBIS program long-term and maintain fidelity? Those are some questions on top of the community transition one that I definitely came up with. So this concludes my presentation. So I'm going to open it up to any questions you may have. And because of that, I'm going to have to turn the camera around.
I honestly...
All right. Okay. Wait. Had to flip it around to get questions. Yes. What is your question?
So after the PBIS was implemented, did the children improve in their academics?
Ah, good question. I'm going to keep the camera this way. Don't laugh.
Good question.
So I did ask that, and it was going to be one of my research questions, but the two people I talked to, the PBIS advisor and the principal, said that they had not been tracking that, so they didn't know. Although They felt like maybe it had, but they had no data on that. Okay?
Thank you.